Welcome to Switched On, Paul here with another top 10 list of 2019 as the clock ticks round on the final few days of the year. Now today's list is the top 10 racing games of 2019. As you'll see in this video, 2019 is the year racing games finally arrived in quality and quantity on the Switch, and let me know in the comments below if I've missed one of your favourites off, as fitting in just 10 proved quite a tricky task. But for now, let's get on with my top 10 racing games of 2019 on the Nintendo Switch. Now number 10 might be seen as a controversial pick, but I've gone with XENON Racer. This is a game I covered a lot on the channel, and one video I made about the game has over 16,000 views so far, and that video was about the controversy surrounding the launch, where the eShop listing before the game launched had footage from what we presume was the PC version and showed the game running in lovely HD graphics and smooth frame rates. When the game finally released on the Switch, it was actually a technical mess with an extremely low resolution, a frame rate in the low 20s at best, and a myriad of other problems. The publisher eventually offered an apology, corrected the eShop video, and over the following few months the game was patched multiple times, with a final large patch leaving the game in an acceptable and playable state, to the point where I scored the game 7 out of 10 in my final review. History lesson aside, XENON Racer is a futuristic racing game, a cross between Wipeout and Ridge Racer, where high-power cars race around well-designed tracks. The cars employ a nice drift mechanic which can be used to build up a boost, and the game does feature some nice touches, and if you can pick it up on sale now, I would be happy to recommend it. Now whilst number 9 was technically released in 2019 on the Switch, it's a classic retro game, and that is Outrun from Sega. The Sega Ages range on the Switch has delivered quality games all year, and none more so than when Outrun kicked off 2019. Surely everyone knows Outrun by now, where you hop into your Ferrari-like car with the top down and the girl at your side and make your way through traffic trying to hit checkpoints for an extended time in a classic arcade fashion. A timeless game and a great port with loads of additional options, and this really should be an absolute must for your library. The Switch has had a few rally games in 2019, and I've gone for WRC8 from Big Ben Software, which delivered a pretty solid experience with just a few technical hitches. The game features a fully licensed experience with all the real-life teams, drivers and locations of the real rally universe, but the feature I enjoyed the most was the detailed career mode, which has a really cool hub for you to direct your career mode from, and lots of interactive ways to develop your driver and team as you work through the calendar of events. A mixed bag graphically, but if you can overlook some rough edges, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's a similar story at number 7 with MotoGP 19, the officially licensed game of the MotoGP series. MotoGP 18 also launched on the Switch to underwhelming reviews, but I found this year's entry a much improved affair. Graphically, whilst better than the previous release, 19 is still a little bit ugly in places, but more importantly they'd smoothed out the frame rate and created a genuine feeling of speed. Controls similarly were tweaked and now include the option to use the right stick as an analog throttle, which was welcome. A deep career mode, a wealth of official tracks from around the world, and some additional modes such as classic races and some of the Moto E electric bike series were a big plus, although the lack of online racing on the Switch was a negative amongst fans. One of the big surprises of the year at number 6, which came pretty much out of nowhere, and that was Rise Race the Future. Not only did it look a fine game, but the title drew my attention when I learned of the story of its development. One of the two main owners at VD Dev had sadly passed away before the game was completed, but the decision was taken to push on with the project and release it almost in his honour. I'm sure he would have been proud of the finished product, which has more than a twang of Ridge Racer about it, but the unique feature of the game is the ability to drive over bodies of water, whereupon your car's wheels flip to create a hovercraft-like vehicle. This was a great feature and one I actually think was slightly underutilised after it was introduced. Some post-launch patches ironed out some further community-requested fixes, and if you like your racing fast, you could do a lot worse than Rise Race the Future. My second two-wheel entry now with the quite excellent port of TT Isle of Man Ride on the Edge, another of a number of Switch games released by Big Ben in 2019 and by developers Kyloton, who also developed the V-Rally and WRC games. TT Isle of Man is very much a simulation with lots of options to tinker with on your bike, and a more detailed control scheme which involves shifting your rider's body weight to help balance your bike, and features the full Isle of Man TT course, some 37 miles of it, with accurately mapped track and roadside features. It's an impressive achievement even if it took a year to bring to the Switch. One of my favourite features in the game is that when you hit a nice fast speed you can hear the wind whistling past you, and it's amazing that just that little touch can add so much to your racing experience. Outside of the main event there isn't too much to do in TT Isle of Man, and the presentation can leave a little bit to be desired, but if you're a fan of two-wheel racing, this one is definitely worth your attention. Gameloft, the giant of mobile game releases, have been slow to dip their toes into the warm waters of the Nintendo Switch, but with the Call of Duty-alike modern combat in the bag, their next effort was the Burnout-inspired Asphalt Legends 9. A free-to-play title that set alarm bells ringing in some quarters, but those fears were allayed when you realise there is a huge chunk of gameplay to get lost in here before the paywall grind hits. The Switch version takes the simplified 2-button control scheme of the mobile game and adds in a new free control mode which allows you to play the game like a traditional racer. Whilst not always rock solid, a pretty impressive 60 frames a second pushes the action along, and some cool tracks with impressive dynamic elements await your selection of high-powered sports cars. With boosts and burnout style takedowns to work for, just getting from A to B isn't always straightforward. If you hate the structure of free-to-play mobile games, then Asphalt will do little to win you over, but for a game that's free to download, you could do a lot worse than giving it a whirl and enjoying what there is to play before it grinds your gears too badly. I did debate putting this in second place as it's such a great game, but I think the fact that it's an arcade game with just 3 short tracks means it doesn't quite have the longevity of the top 2. But even so, its gameplay has stood the test of time, and it's a pioneer of the modern day 3D racing game. That game of course is Virtua Racing, the second Sega Ages entry in the list. Using more modern hardware in its cabinet than Outrun, 1992's Virtua Racing was one of the very first racing games to use polygonal graphics, and in doing so allowed the player to switch through multiple camera angles when racing, which was surely one of the first racing games to achieve this. All these features are ported perfectly to the Switch, alongside a new 8-player local split-screen mode, which is quite the sight to see, although impractical to play due to how much screen real estate each player is allocated. Running at 1080p and 60 frames a second, a real gem of a game, and I'm begging for further Sega Ages racing ports in 2020, such as Daytona USA and Sega Rally. The most recent release on the list, coming out just a few days before Christmas, is a game developed by amazingly a single developer, and that is Rush Rally 3 by Stephen Brown. After being part of the teams of developers that worked on some of the biggest racing games on other platforms, Stephen branched out on his own and launched the Rush Rally series on mobile platforms to decent critical acclaim, but it's 2019's third entry that's seen Stephen's work on the series really all come together to make the most comprehensive package to date. A fully fledged career mode spanning 4 classes of rally cars, hundreds of stages in a multitude of weather and lighting conditions, it really is a very impressive piece of work. Whilst not actually licensed, the cars are close enough facsimiles of their real-life counterparts, and the stages all hit the right notes from the dusty roads of Mexico to the tight, twisting, ice-covered lanes of snowy Sweden. Presentation is as you'd expect for a lone developer, and it's a credit to Stephen that it actually does look as good as it does at times, but shortcuts can be seen in places, such as each car having the same interior, which is a bit of a shame, although this is being considered for an update post-launch. The racing action though shines through, and it's a fast, responsive racing model, and it's a hell of a lot of fun to drive in. Although the game lacks a full online mode, each stage has its own leaderboard plus a weekly live challenge to keep things competitive, and rounding off the package is an excellent car editor, allowing you to update the look of any car by changing its colour and even creating your own logos and livery designs. Rush Rally 3 is just a superb racing game that, considering the releases from other huge teams this year, is still my second favourite racing game I've played in 2019. Now I don't think there's going to be any doubt, especially if you've been a subscriber to the channel for the last half of the year, but of course taking the checkered flag in first place is the quite superb port of Codemasters' Grid Autosport from Feral Interactive. Feral have quite the reputation as port masters, first catching my eye with the iOS port of Grid, which at the time was a really pioneering game to come to mobile platforms, and has since made developers believe there is a market for these sort of games for mobile gamers. It was a technical masterpiece at the time, only running on the top range of Apple's hardware, and eventually through excellent post-launch support, optimised to run on a wider range of iPhones and iPads. That experience surely held Feral in good stead as they set about porting Grid for the Switch, a console which is arguably less powerful than some top-end mobile devices nowadays. Their diligent optimisation work has given us a quite remarkable port, and yes, okay, it's a game that's been around for a while, but it's nonetheless a nice looking game still by today's standards. Even after installing an optional high resolution graphics pack, you can still choose to run the game on the Switch in a high performance mode at a pretty smooth 60 frames per second, which does pare back some of the fancier effects, or if you prefer you can run the game with all the bells and whistles in a locked 30 frames per second mode. There's even a third mode dedicated to power saving in handheld mode if you're without a charger for an extended period. For me, running in best graphics mode is my choice, with the 30 frames per second feeling great, and more importantly the racing comes alive with the smoke and dirt being kicked up, sparks flying off the more detailed cars, and just a generally nicer lighting model. But again, for those that can only play games in 60 frames per second, at least you do have the option to do that. The career mode spans multiple disciplines from touring cars to open wheelers and drift racing to drag events. Each discipline has multiple tiers too, allowing you to work up from Formula 3 to what is effectively Formula 1 in the open wheelers, for example, and each series of races in the career mode are set on lovingly created real-world tracks that may lack the 100% accuracy of today's laser scanned offerings, but do a great job of representing each location and most importantly are fun to drive. With masses of options including support for GameCube controllers and an online multiplayer patch due to arrive in 2020, it's going to take a monumental effort to top this as the best racing game on the Switch. In fact, I wager that if it's anybody, it will eventually be Feral that top themselves with another Codemasters port at some point. But until then, if you're a racing sim fan and don't own Grid, then as soon as you've liked this video and have hit subscribe, then you can get yourself a copy off the eShop today. Thank you so much for watching my top 10 racing games of 2019. Please do leave me a comment below if you disagree, as there are certainly a couple of games I've not put in my top 10 that could have easily deserved a place. So which ones would you swap out? Well, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next video. Thanks everyone, bye bye.